Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, once again, after a long gap.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening.
Very good evening. Somehow I am not able to start my video.
Some bandwidth problem or something else?
No. You cannot start your video because the host has disabled it. Unless
I would request Secretariat to see to it. Initially, my video was also not. Now it is there. So,
thank you.
So, good evening, sir, and good evening, Dr. Shelley, and all the participants, all panelists. After a long gap, we are meeting again to discuss some new topic. We have already completed 45 episodes of our DigiConnect webinars during this COVID-19 pandemic for last 1 year, and 4 editions of OcuHealth Escapes, in which we, Dr. Shelley, in which we discuss every month the recent advances and recent developments in the field of industrial health and occupational health across the globe. Today, again, we are here to discuss an important topic that is neutralizing antibody testing, why it is required in the present context. And sir, as we all know that COVID pandemic, it is now the second wave is now started in India, and now almost 1 lakh cases, they are happening almost daily. And in this scenario, with more than 131 million people who have been infected across the globe, and 2.8 million deaths worldwide, and in India also, we are like having almost 446 deaths per day for last 2-3 days. So with this, the only diagnostic things and other things which we have in our hand, which is mainstay of this COVID mitigation strategy, is the RT-PCR, which is a gold standard. And now since vaccination has started, we also, like FDA has given approval for neutralizing antibody test. So if we can use it in India to for the purpose of assessing the people who have been infected and who had been vaccinated, to see what is the level of the neutralizing antibodies and how it can help us for further protection from COVID-19. So in this regard, sir, Dr. Shelley Mahajan, she had earlier also been a guest faculty for us, where in October 24th, she did the 31st issue with COVID-19 test. What do they really mean? And we thought that this is the best opportunity to learn from her about this neutralizing antibody, because this is also a new burning topic for every one of us. So in this regard, sir, I would request you to give the welcome address.
Good evening, friends. This is my privilege to welcome you all to this 46th series of our webinar, which we are conducting for more than 1 year now. Due to this COVID pandemic. And today's topic is very apt, keeping in view as Dr. Sandeep was telling, second wave. Some of the people are telling third wave or fourth wave. I don't know, whatever wave it may be, but it is really dangerous and it is taking heavy toll, and it is putting the nation in turmoil. Under these circumstances, I think that today's topic is now very, very relevant and very important. Because concurrently the vaccination program is also on. So what is the level of protection with the antibodies, with the people all around is very, very important. So I'm sure Dr. Shelley will take care of all the questions in this regard in our deliberations. I welcome Dr. Shelley as well. And with these few words, I welcome you all, and I hand over to Dr. Sandeep. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, before I request Dr. Shelley for starting her presentation, there was a setback for every one of us. Dr. Tyagraj, who is also a panelist with us right now, he's a senior member from Bangalore. His wife, Ms. Dr. Saroj Tyagaraja, she expired few days back, and we express our sincere condolence and sincere our heartfelt condolence to this setback, sir. And we are all with you, sir, during this period. And we are all a family. And I would request everyone to pay homage for about 1 minute silence, by giving 1 minute silence. Thank you all. May God give enough courage to Dr. Tyagaraja and the whole family to bear this irreparable loss. And with this is life, and life has to go on. With this, I now introduce Dr. Shaili Mahajan to you all. Dr. Shaili Mahajan runs the Caring DX, North India's most advanced molecular pathology lab, and she is a qualified molecular pathologist, and she specializes in hereditary cancer and precision medicine. And she has now conducted, now the numbers might have changed. She has conducted more than 50,000 COVID-19 RT-PCR tests now in her lab. And additionally, she and her team were part of world's most successful COVID genomic test called the COVID sequencing. Over the years, she has served as invited faculty at many conferences and meetings in the domain molecular pathology and genomics. And she did her MBBS from Sion Hospital in Mumbai and a pathology residency from Himalayan Institute, Dehradun, and senior residency from JTB Hospital. And she is also served a visiting professor at University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, USA, and has worked on finding novel markers for prostate cancer. So Dr. Shaili, we thought amongst our group, our family of doctors here in Delhi, you are the most apt person for telling us what these neutralizing antibodies are and how they are important. And we are also joined by our IUH President, Dr. Vijay Rao. We welcome Dr. Vijay Rao sir also for this webinar. And Dr. Shaili, you can start your presentation. Later on, we'll have a discussion on the queries of the learned participants. Yeah.
Sure. Let me. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah. Yes. Sir.
Okay. So I'll just share my screen. So very good evening to all of you. I sincerely thank Dr. Sandeep, Dr. Gajendra, and the whole association for inviting me for a second time. I just feel that, you know, when you invite somebody for the second time, that means that I must have helped and done something good in the last lecture. So thank you so much for that. It's really inspirational and motivational. So you know, when I started about what I'll talk about in neutralizing antibodies, I started making it, and then I realized that before that, what we need to know is what these antibodies are and what do they mean. So it would have been incomplete if I would not talk about the whole spectrum of antibody testing. Last time I came here, I spoke about all the diagnostic tests for COVID-19. And now we are beyond that. Like all of us know very well what test get done when. Now the time is for antibody testing when, more than about half of our population has already been infected, and then the vaccinations are completely rolled out. So now is the time to know what COVID antibodies are, what do they mean, what different kinds of antibodies are, what different kinds of tests are available, and what is the latest thing which has come up, the neutralizing antibody test. So I'll just straight away jump into the topic. Now, before I move on, let me just talk about the humoral response in COVID-19. Now, what happens is, now this is the SARS-CoV-2, the COVID virus, and I spoke about the structure also the last time. But as far as antibody formation is concerned, spike protein is the most important protein because this is the one which is causing the antigenicity. What happens is the spike protein, the receptor binding domain on the spike protein attaches itself to the host receptors called ACE receptors. The host cells respond and the immune cells get activated. And eventually what happens is that the B cells are activated to produce plasma cells and antibodies are secreted. Now, these antibodies are produced against very specific viral antigens, most commonly N and S. So when this means that if it's formed against very specific viral antigens, then the antibody can attack only those specific viral antigens. For example, if I am infected naturally, I've had a natural infection with COVID-19, I'm exposed to all the antigens, obviously. So the antibodies which are formed in my body are against all the antigens. So it'll be all against S antigen also and N antigen also. Versus if I'm vaccinated, now the vaccines which are available these days are mostly against spike protein. It has only the spike antigen. So we all know the principle of vaccine, and inactivated antigen is injected into the body, and then the body produces antibodies against it. Now the vaccines available these days have the spike protein antigen, and hence the antibodies which are produced post-vaccination are against the S protein. So this is the basic difference between the immunity caused by, or the antibodies produced by natural infection versus antibodies produced by vaccination. But essentially the immune response remains the same, that the antigen enters the body, then the host cell reacts by generating or activating all these immune cells, and then ultimately the antibodies are formed. So now coming to this sort of life cycle of the COVID infection in our body. So when there is COVID exposure, within the first few weeks, as we all know now, is within the first few weeks, the viral load is so low that it may not be detected by a RT-PCR test. Now, when the viral load increases, the RT-PCR test becomes positive. Now, when we speak about antibodies, similarly, antibodies will remain negative till the viral load reaches at its peak. And now when the viral load is at its peak, and after that it starts dropping, that's when the antibodies start to develop. Sometime between week 1 or week 2. When they start developing, then the antibody, an antibody test starts coming to be positive. The first antibodies which are produced for the acute infection are IgM antibodies. They develop early, but they also wane off early. Then the IgG antibodies develop later, but they stay for long, right? So what can happen here is that the IgG antibodies can then identify persons which have past or resolving infection, because these are not, because these persist. Right. And also the antibody development confers some degree of immunity for at least 6 months. However, it is not known to what extent emerging variants may impact immunity. And this is very important in terms of knowing that even if we have antibodies, even if we have had a natural infection, or even if we are vaccinated, we still are not sure And we have to understand that it is a very new virus, and it still remains to be new. That's why even after vaccination, now we are getting another wave. So this is very important to know, that even after vaccination, even when we have antibodies, we still don't know to what part of the virus we are not vaccinated or not immune. So still, it only means that the chances of spreading the infection might be less, the chances of getting an infection might be less, and also chances of getting a severe disease might be very less. So that's the importance of getting vaccinated. Now, the antibody, as I said, the antibodies can and the immunity can develop by two modes. Either it can be a natural infection or by vaccination. And when we talk about natural infection, as I said, the innate immune response gets activated. Eventually, T cells and B cells get activated, and antibodies are formed mostly against spike protein and nucleocapsid protein. Now, for antibodies, the S protein on the virus is the target. So the antibody binds to the S protein. Now, even in S protein, there are subunits, S1 and S2. The neutralizing antibodies do not attach themselves to the S2 part. They attach only to the S1 part. And that too, the receptor binding domain of the S1 part. Now, why is this important to know? It's important to know because for example, when we get an antibody test done, okay, we need to know what is being tested, okay? An antibody test can be a simple IgG test, or a IgG plus IgM test, or a spike protein antibody test. So even if my IgG is positive, even if my total antibodies are positive, I don't know whether those antibodies are against the spike protein or not. And I will be protected mostly when, or strongly protected if I have the antibodies against the spike protein. So that's why now there's a test in the market called spike protein antibodies. So that's the importance of that. So again, this is the same graph which we just spoke about, but it's very important to know this because, there's this whole plethora of antibodies which are, done. Again, antibodies start to develop within few weeks of infection, and IgG antibodies remain for a long time. Now, the spike protein antibodies also remain for a very long time and may confer an immunity for about 5 to 6 months. Other than that, this I've already spoken about, I'll just read it out. IgG antibodies, including IgG against the S and N proteins, persist for at least several months in most persons. Seroreversion has been reported among persons with mild disease. So this is very important. When we have had a mild disease, the immune response to the infection is also mild. And when we have a severe disease, the immune response to the virus is also strong. So if it is a mild disease, the antibody response will be very less. And that would mean that the antibodies will also decay faster. That means there can be a seroreversion very quickly if it is a mild disease. More severe disease means more robust antibody response with IgM, IgG, and IgA, which means higher titers of antibodies, which means a longer persistence of antibodies in the body. And approximately 5 to 10% of the people do not develop antibodies following an infection, probably because the inoculum of virus or the viral load was not enough. As I said, the higher the viral load, the higher are the titers of antibody production. Now, although neutralizing antibodies may not be detected among patients with mild or asymptomatic diseases, the humoral immune response appears to remain intact even with loss of specific antibodies over time. So as I said, neutralizing antibodies or the spike protein antibodies, they are very, very specific antibodies against the spike antigen of the virus. Now, even if that is not detected, or that is because of a mild disease, those antibodies are not produced, the general antibodies, that is IgG and IgM, may still persist for some time and may still provide the immune status. even if the specific antibodies disappear over time. So the idea is that there is still a lot to be known. There are many variables when we talk about antibodies. Like when people come to us and say antibody test karana hai, we need to know what we are looking for. Are we looking for a possibility of a recent or past infection? Are we looking for the vaccination, the post-vaccination immunity status? Or are we looking for just generally, how much, because of a past infection, how much antibodies are there left? Now, what is my sero status? So for all of that, there are specific, we can still, specify which kind of test should be done. Now, what about COVID again, or reinfection? Reinfection is rare, but certainly it is a possibility. As I said, because if it was a mild infection in the past, and because of which if the antibody titers are low, or if there is seroreversion, that means the antibody titers were low and now they have reversed to negative antibodies, reinfection can certainly happen. Persons with anti-SARS-CoV-2 antibodies are less likely to develop subsequent infection than persons without such antibodies. So now there are enough studies which prove that they are less likely to develop a subsequent infection. We still don't know whether, I mean, there still is possibility that the reinfection can happen, but they are less likely. Like they are possibly immune, but the reinfection thing can happen again, and that's why we still need to even if we are recovered, even if we have like very high titer of antibodies, we do need to still wear masks and still maintain social distancing. Because as I said, if I have antibodies, I get infection, I'll get a very mild infection or very mild disease, but I can spread it to somebody who does not have antibodies, and there the infection will be very severe. So that is very important. Unless everyone has antibodies, we still need to maintain all these security measures. Antibody development following SARS-CoV-2 correlates with a marked decrease in viral load in the respiratory tract, although a clinical correlation with viral load in the respiratory tract has not been definitely established. This is also studies have proven this fact. What this means in very simple terms is that it has been found that if there are antibodies following SARS-CoV-2, it is found that the infection in respiratory tract is less. That means if we take a throat swab, it may come out to be RT-PCR positive. That means the person is infected with SARS-CoV-2 even though he had antibodies. But it has been found that more commonly such infections are not spreading to the lungs. There are less severe respiratory tract symptoms because of this. So this is one of the findings in the studies, and which is a good news, right? Because even if it may eventually turn out to be like a common cold infection, but it's not causing, it's not over flooding our hospitals, it's not over flooding our ventilators, because the symptoms are not coming out to be very severe. SARS-CoV-2 infection and development of antibody can result in some level of protection against SARS-CoV-2 reinfection. So as I said, there may be some level of protection. They are less likely, but of course, if we are after recovering, if somebody is just roaming around without masks and going to public places, maintaining no social distancing, then there is no guarantee that the infection will not happen again. So the likelihood is less, but of course, security measures have to be taken. The durability of this immunity has yet to be determined. Now, even though we know all of this, that if antibodies are there, infection may not happen, or if happens, it will be very mild. We still don't know for how long that immunity will last. Whether it will last for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, we are not sure. We are still not sure. So reinfection can happen in 3 months also, in 6 months also. Right? Because these things are proven with longitudinal studies, and we are in the middle of the pandemic, so we don't have that much longitudinal study data to be sure of these things, but these are just preliminary results. Now, while lifelong immunity has not been observed with endemic seasonal coronaviruses, studies of persons infected with the novel SARS-CoV-1 and MERS they demonstrated measurable antibody for 18 to 24 months following infection, and neutralizing antibodies was present for much larger time. So, we can, past can reflect the future. So, SARS-CoV-1 and MERS have been genetically, found to be homologous, quite similar to SARS-CoV-2. And so it can be interpreted that after recovery from the infection, the immunity or the presence of antibodies for these infections has been over 1.5 years, and neutralizing antibodies for even longer. So we can assume that maybe the immunity may last for that long as well, but there is not enough data to prove that in this particular virus. It is not known to what extent persons reinfected with SARS-CoV-2 might transmit infection to others, or whether the clinical spectrum differs from that of primary infection. Like I said, even if I am immune, even if I have many antibodies, I still can infect other people, or I may still get infected, but what clinically how I will present, we are not sure. Now coming to the next form of formation of antibodies for SARS-CoV-2, vaccination. Now, vaccines, the principle of vaccines is to, as I said, to inject an antigen, an inactivated antigen, in this case in a person, so that the immune response of the person gets activated, and within a few weeks, the antibodies are formed. In case of this virus, like I mentioned, spike protein has been targeted for vaccine production because this is the protein which has shown to be the main pathogenic antigen of this virus. They bind to the ACE2 receptor of the humans, and this is the part which is attacked by the vaccine. The vaccine candidates that have received EUA or are in late stage development aim to elicit neutralizing antibodies against the S protein, or to be more specific, the receptor binding domain of the S protein. It is unknown whether natural infection confers a similar degree of immunity compared to vaccination. So that we still don't know. The antibodies are formed in both, but what kind of protection or what kind of immunity they provide us, that still we are not sure about. Now, and this is something, because these are the questions we get asked by our patients in our daily work. So patients come to us and say that I got vaccinated 1 month back. Now I need to know whether that vaccine worked or not. Now, firstly, to see whether the vaccine worked or not, we need to also have the antibody titers pre-vaccination. Because obviously, like if you had, for example, just hypothetically 100 units, 100 antibodies before vaccination, but that was because of a natural infection, the antibodies have to decay. The antibody level will decrease with time. But if like 2-3 weeks after the vaccination, I get you tested and you have 80 antibodies, how will we know whether it is because of some natural infection which had happened in the past, or is it because of vaccine? So to see if the vaccine is working or not, we need that data before and after vaccination. But for clinical purposes, of course, that's not important for us. If we have antibodies, we have antibodies. Like that's just out of curiosity that we want to know that vaccine ki wajah se hai ya natural infection ki wajah se hai. So so there is one thing, as I said, natural infection, antibodies are formed against that, mostly both S and N. So the antibodies formed by natural infection are against both S and N protein. So these will be IgG and IgM antibodies against these two proteins. There is IgA antibody also, but the significance is not much. Vaccinated persons may test positive by serologic test for the vaccine antigenic target. And I said vaccine targets are S protein and S subunits like S1, S2, and more specifically RBD of the S1. So, so now if I test somebody and that there are total antibodies, I do total antibodies. I don't know whether the antibodies are S protein, N protein. I mean, they're just total antibodies. So we can only say that, okay, antibodies are there, but we can't say that it's because of vaccination or is it because of natural infection, right? But if we do spike protein antibodies, we will know that it is certainly due to vaccination. So that's why while interpretation of sero or antibody tests or serologic testing, if we really want to know the meaning of that, we need to know a little bit of history. History of vaccination or any prior infection must be considered when interpreting serologic test results and compare it with what kind of test was done. Although an antibody test may employ a specific antigen, antibodies developed in response to different proteins may cross-react. So this is also very important. Sometimes if it's not a very specific antibody, there can be cross-reaction. It's also a well-known mechanism that if it's not a very specific antigen to the virus, like for example, there can be a cross-reaction with influenza virus. So we don't know the antibodies are against SARS-CoV-2 or some other infection. So to just make sense of an antibody test, this kind of history is very important. So for currently FDA authorized tests, it has not been established whether the antigens employed by test specifically detects only antibodies against that antigen and not others. And none of these tests have been specifically authorized to assess individuals who have received a vaccine. So as I said, although we can get an idea, but as far as FDA authorization goes, none of these tests have been authorized to tell you whether vaccine has worked or not. They can only tell you whether antibodies are present or not. We can only, based on the history, we can only interpret, okay, that maybe this is because of the vaccine or maybe this is because of a past infection. EUA indications for currently authorized tests do not preclude the use of these tests on individuals who have received a SARS-CoV-2 vaccine. So there is no, this thing ki we cannot interpret it like that, but the, they can be used for vaccine, post-vaccination status purposes, but they are not authorized to specifically say that. Vaccination may cause false positive results for tests that utilize S antigen or subunits like RBD, but not for tests that use the N antigen, right? So this I have spoken about already. Now, what are the considered? So why are we talking about this? Because if I have antibodies, I still have to wear mask. I still have to follow the precautions. And why do we need to know about it? Because of this community spread thing, right? Presence of antibodies following natural infection may produce some level of protection from reinfection. We know that these are like some key takeaways which we really, really need to keep in mind. Because, and this is from my personal experience, I have friends who, whose parents are 60 plus, so they got vaccinated. And now they feel that they are safe. And I really had to like sort of scold them and fight with them that it does not mean that the pandemic has come to an end. It's certainly not. And see, now we are seeing the next wave. So reinfections and infection after vaccination is a reality. So, we are certainly not out of the pandemic by any means. Reduced incidence of infection among persons with SARS-CoV-2 antibodies followed for 3 months or longer. Studies have proven this. Data demonstrating that vaccination can reduce the incidence of illness. We have that data. Findings from outbreak investigations that pre-existing detectable antibody correlates with reduced incidence of infection. Viral neutralization demonstrated by serum from persons following infection. This is something, okay, I haven't spoken about yet. So the other importance of these neutralizing antibodies is in treatment. It has also started in the US, but not in India yet, treatment with monoclonal antibodies, where the antibodies from monoclonal antibodies, till now we were only doing plasma infusions, but here monoclonal antibodies are isolated from patient serum, somebody who has recovered from infection and has antibodies. antibodies are taken from that and infused in the patient. So this has proven to have benefits in terms of quicker recovery and lesser symptoms and less severe disease. Decreased disease severity associated with administration of monoclonal antibodies. So this is the importance of serologic testing when it comes to a broader community view. Serosurveillance, of course, we know how much prevalence is there in a in a particular kind of community. It has epidemiological importances. The epidemiologists, they study these patterns, and we come up with policies to how to contain the infection or how to treat the infection. And of course, the awareness amongst people that I may be little protected, but I am still prone to the infection. So coming to antibody testing, we have seen this chart earlier. Why I'm showing this again is that while S protein is essential for virus entry and is present on the viral surface, N protein is the most abundantly expressed immunodominant protein. So that's why again and again we are coming down to these two proteins, because S protein is the most pathogenic, so vaccines are produced made against this, and N protein is the most immunodominant. That means the most, when we have a natural infection, the antibodies are quickly formed against this protein, right? Multiple forms of S protein are used as antigens for serologic tests when we talk about spike protein neutralizing antibody test. The protein target determines cross-reactivity and specificity because N is more conserved across coronaviruses than S. And within S, RBD is more conserved. So you see what I'm saying? When we say N protein is more conserved in coronaviruses, that means it is a protein which is specific to SARS-CoV-2. That means the antibodies which are produced against N protein are more specific to SARS-CoV-2. So there will be lesser chances of false positive. While when we talk about S protein, the S protein is also mildly conserved, but specifically the receptor binding domain of the S protein, and hence the vaccines are trying to target that part of the virus. Antibody detection against RBD is considered to have higher correlation towards functional aspects like ability to neutralize virus, right? So there are two kinds of antibodies in our, it's just generally in serology, there are two kinds of antibodies, binding antibodies and neutralizing antibodies. Binding antibodies are something which will, as the name suggests, bind to the antigen, any target of the antigen of the virus, and it promotes or activates the T cell immune system of the body. The T cells are the ones which will come and kill the virus. So the antibodies are not killing the virus. Versus neutralizing antibodies are the antibodies which attach to the target of the virus, and mostly it attaches to that target which is used to enter the host cell. So in this case, it will be S protein. So it will bind or sort of combine with the with that target and neutralize it, and there'll be some structural change or there'll be some functional change. Something will happen and it will neutralize the virus. That means the virus may not be killed immediately, but it will not be able to enter the host cell. So that's the difference between binding antibodies and neutralizing antibodies. Eventually, the function remains the same for both the antibodies. The testing strategies remain the same for both the antibodies. There is just slightly functional differences in both the antibodies. Now talking about binding, a little bit about binding antibodies. For binding antibodies, we use purified proteins of SARS-CoV-2 and not live virus. The test may tell you total antibody, that is IgM plus Ig plus IgA, or individual antibodies. We know very, very well now that IgG antibodies, if we want to go for only IgG antibodies, we will know whether there has been a past or recent past infection with the virus. IgM will show if we have had a recent infection or current active infection. And IgA is it sort of shows the mucosal immunity, but it's not very significant, so I won't talk about it. Now, depending on their complexity, some binding antibody tests I mean, there are multiple antibody tests available. There are certain CARD tests, there are CLIA tests, and there are ELISA tests. So depending on what kind of chemistry we are following, they can be, the results can come within minutes to within hours. So there are two kinds of tests: point of care tests for binding antibodies and laboratory tests for binding antibodies. Point of care tests are generally lateral flow devices. Lateral flow devices are basically the CARD test, wherein like this image is showing here, wherein you put the sample in the sample well, and by lateral flow of sample, we'll get 1 or 2 bands and tell us whether the antibody is present or not, right? So they can detect IgG and IgM individually also, or total antibody also, depending on what kind of kit we are using. So that's what we also need to know, what kind of kit we are using, which we will decide based on what kind of information we are looking for. Also, lab tests are there for binding antibodies, like lateral flow, ELISA, and CLIA methods. Currently, CLIA methods are considered to be the best for antibody detection in serum, plasma, whole blood, or even dried blood spots, right? These, of course, require a little bit of trained personnel and some expensive, good equipment. And based on the reagents, again, here also total antibody can be found out. Individually, IgG and IgM can be detected. Now, while most tests detect antibodies against either S or N proteins, some tests can detect antibodies against immunodominant proteins, like all the immunodominant proteins. These are called multiplex assays. That will be more like total antibody. Now, come to neutralizing antibodies. Now, neutralizing antibodies determine the functional ability of antibodies to prevent infection by virus in vitro. As I said, it may not kill the virus, but it will hamper the function of the virus, or it will hamper the activity of the virus to enter the host cell and then infect the host. And they also monitor inhibition of viral growth in cell culture when incubated with serum or plasma. So this is one of the methods of finding out neutralizing antibodies. But of course, such a method cannot be done in our kind of laboratories. They require BSL-3 and BSL-4 level of safety, because they are dealing with live virus. But there are 3 kinds of tests which can be done for neutralizing antibodies. Virus neutralization tests, such as plaque reduction neutralization tests. I mean, this is something which is not commercialized because of safety reasons. Again, here we are dealing with live virus, so it cannot be done in any commercial laboratory. This testing can take up to 5 days to complete. And of course, there are currently no EUA authorized VNTs or authorized labs, because it's very unsafe to do, very kind of dangerous to do this. Second method for neutralizing antibodies is the pseudo-virus neutralization test. Now here, in the first test, viral neutralization test, here we are using live virus. Next is the pseudo-virus, where we are using some, some kind of recombinant or, lab-generated kind of pseudo-viruses. Again, these are safer than the previous one, but still here also we are dealing with kind of a live virus. So this test also cannot be done in commercial settings. But what we can do is competitive neutralization tests. Here, we are not using a live virus. These are binding antibody tests designed to qualitatively detect potentially neutralizing antibodies, often those that prevent interaction of RBD with ACE2 receptor. So these terms are coming up again and again, but this is so important. This is the basis of antibodies and vaccinations when it comes to COVID-19. The test mimics, it's an ELISA based test, mimics so it'll basically, what it'll do is it'll mimic the actual interaction between the virus and ACE2. And then when the serum is put, then the antibodies will get activated and we'll see the positive results. So these tests can be conducted in BSL-2 laboratories because they do not require live virus. So these are the tests which are now newly approved by FDA for antibody testing post-vaccination. Now, what they do is they block the virus from neutralizing antibodies. What they do, as I said, they block the virus from entering the cells. They are generated about 5 to 10 days post-infection. And I mean, the prelim data currently shows that there can be sustained immunity for about 4 to 6 months. They can be produced either by infection or by vaccination, both. Because as I said, when we have an infection, we are exposed to all kinds of viral targets. It will be S also, it will be N also, it will be other minor targets also. So the antibodies which will be produced would be against all, right? But vaccination, we are only exposed to the S antigen, right? So now I just, just trying to come down to key takeaways from all of this. Natural acute infection from SARS-CoV-2 is determined best by diagnostic testing using NAT or antigen test. So again, if there are IgM antibodies, we still cannot use it for diagnostic purposes. For diagnostic purposes, we still have to use the RT-PCR testing. Of course, if we have 2 antibody reports with us and the patient has not been vaccinated in between, the patient has not been diagnosed by RT-PCR in between, and one is negative, 2 months later, we have another antibody report which is positive, IgG positive, then we can assume that there has been a recent infection in the past 2 months between those 2 antibody tests. But for diagnostic purposes, still we have to use the antigen-based tests. Secondly, resolving a previous infection is best determined by serologic testing that indicates the presence of antibody. Here, in this case, IgG, we have spoken about it. Because when the infection is resolving, the RT-PCR test can also give false negatives. So their correlation with the antibody test gives a fair idea of what's happening. Natural infection with SARS-CoV-2 with subsequent development of antibodies may confer some level of immunity for at least 3 months. So again, we are using the term may. It seems that the infection is lesser, but there are chances of getting the infection still. The robustness and durability of immunity following natural infection remains unknown, as does how it compares to vaccine-induced immunity. So we need more data to prove this, but for how long or for how strongly the immunity will act, like we don't know yet whether antibody value of 100, is it good enough to prevent the next infection? Or we need it in terms of 500 or 600. So we know that antibodies are there, but we don't know how much antibodies do we need to be, protected against the virus in the future. So that this is some information which is still, evolving and is coming up with new studies every day. Further, tests issued EUA by the FDA are recommended for clinic and public health purposes. These are all, all the authorized tests are there on the FDA website if anyone needs to see. Serologic tests with very high sensitivity and specificity are preferred. The FDA has authorized those tests which have high specificity and sensitivity. IgG levels appear to decrease more slowly over time than levels of other classes of antibody. We know this. IgG levels are indicative of a chronic, of a past infection. Therefore, assays that measure total antibody or IgG may have higher sensitivity as the time between infection and antibody testing increases. Okay, so if we are only looking for a past infection, or immunity because of a past infection, then what we are looking for is IgG antibody test, right? While IgM antibody can persist for weeks to months following infection, though we know that it is short-lived. IgM antibodies disappear quicker than IgG. So they may suggest a recent infection. So if you are looking few months, if you are seeing मेरे को 5 महीने पहले infection हुआ था, do I still have antibodies? we should see IgG antibodies. Or if we are seeing whether, 3-4 hafte pehle hi hua tha, do I have antibodies, and IgG plus IgM can also work. But IgM is more indicative of an acute infection. FDA has issued an EUA for a competitive neutralization test, as I mentioned just now, which is a qualitative binding assay that detects antibodies that block the interaction between the virus and the ACE2 receptor. So this is the latest test which has come up. Now, just to sort of reaching towards the end of my talk, some other key takeaways: that antibody tests should not be used to establish the presence or absence of acute infection. And I'm saying this again and again because in our experience, we have been answering this question every day to few patients at least, that antibody positive test does not mean that you have SARS-CoV-2 infection. After infection, antibodies begin to develop measurable, the person begins to develop measurable antibodies within 1 or 2 weeks. And after 3 weeks, most of the patients, they will test positive for antibody. But this will also depend on what severity of infection had happened. Was it an asymptomatic infection? Was it a mild infection? Was it a very severe infection? So it depends on the viral load or the inoculum of the virus, which is created, which determines the severity of the antibody level or the immunity which is produced. In a person who is never vaccinated, now how do we interpret it? In a person who is never vaccinated and the antibody test turns out to be positive against either N, S or RBD, it indicates prior natural infection. Okay. So, but in a vaccinated person, if the person is testing positive for antibody against and it's a total antibody test, which does not define that we are only testing S antigen, we can't be sure whether the antibodies are because of vaccination or because of a prior infection. But if the test says that it's a spike protein test and the person is vaccinated, then still, we can assume that it is because of the vaccination. Now I'll end my talk with this very important slide. As I've been saying all through my presentation, it's a very good thing that we are vaccinated. It's a very good thing that we have antibodies, but still we don't know the amount of protection the antibodies will produce. We don't know how much antibodies we need to be protected. We don't know for how long the antibodies will last. So still, the best solution right now is to follow all the COVID-19 precautions like washing hands, wearing masks, maintaining social distancing. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening to me patiently. I hope this was a helpful talk, and I'm open to any questions that you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shelly. Really, it was an eye-opening for many of us. As you rightly told, that antibodies can be, there were a lot of confusion amongst us also. What are the antibody levels we should go for testing after some infection or after vaccination? So as you rightly mentioned, that after infection, that will be total antibodies will be raised. They can be IgM, IgG or IgA. They may be against N or S protein. But after vaccination, it is specific, and they are the neutralizing antibodies which develop after vaccination. So we should basically, after vaccination, if we are going to test for the antibodies, it should be S protein antibodies. So I hope our colleagues, they have some questions regarding today's topic. So first, Dr. Gajendra Kumar sir. Yeah.
Yes, first of all, I compliment Dr. Shelly for a wonderful talk, and she has discussed all aspects in very, very great details. Thank you so much, Dr. Saab. Now I have got 3 statements to make, and I need your expert comments on my statements. First statement is, when we will be rid of this pandemic? Number 1.
So that's $1 million question, I think. Honestly, last month when the positivity actually came down to less than 0.5% and the vaccinations were in full roll, there was a hope. But unfortunately, in the past few weeks, we have again seen a exponential rise in cases. It could be because of, and we saw the previous wave right after Diwali, and now right after Holi. So it could be because of, people not following the social distancing norms and all. But unfortunately, there is this rise again. So we still don't know when we will get rid of this, but we can still be safe by wearing masks and all. That's actually $1 million question. I don't think I can answer that.
My comment to the statement is, in the last pandemic of Spanish flu, it took almost 2 years to vanish, because in the last time, though the vaccination was not there, 2 years was taken for the herd immunity to develop in the community. And that may occur this time. Now, my second question is, see, we live in a country which is highly populous, 135 crore people living in a small piece of land. How far this social distancing is possible? Social distancing or physical distancing, is it possible in our country? And my question is, if because of lack of social distancing, there is subclinical infection, does it not going to help us to eradicate the infection? This is my second statement.
Yeah. So, social distancing it does not mean that I need to be, it does not always mean that I need to be alone, because that's not possible as a human. We are social animals. But social distancing also means wearing a mask at all times. Now we, like for example, even if we are meeting for, say, a festival, it's okay. It's been 1.5 years. We've not met our relatives and friends, and it's an important festival. It's for your mental, for your mental health also, we need to meet people. So it's possible to, make bubbles. Like I select, okay, these are my 4-5 people or 6 people, 7-8 people who I want to socially meet. That's fine. You're still at least reducing your risk of transmission. The problem is when people are doing parties and when people are going to weddings with 100 guests. I think it's time to come out of that stereotype that log kya kahenge unko nahi bulaya to, or log kya kahenge ki hame bulaya aur hum nahi gaye to. So I think that is more of a social issue. But that said, it's what I also tell my friends is that agar mujhe ho gaya ya hamare age ke kisi ko ho gaya, it's okay, we will recover. But it can be catastrophic for certain people. So, I think for that, it's very important to still accept the fact that please make a bubble of people you really want to meet, or, don't just go to a party or a wedding just to oblige someone.
Right.
Because those 5 minutes in a party can also ruin like a whole family. So that's because, I'll give you an example. There was a wedding somewhere, and that attitude ki hame kuch nahi ho sakta types. So we actually, in that wedding, only 150 people wedding, we tested about 40-50 people positive within a week of the wedding. In that wedding brigade. So, and then we also, did testing for a whole wedding brigade before the wedding. So those were the wise people. They were like, we spend 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 rupees per person when we give them, like, whatever gifts we give them for wedding, sari, suit, etc., etc. Might as well give 800 rupees and get them tested before the wedding. And that was in my opinion, that's a very wise decision. So if social distancing does not mean that don't meet people at all, but meet people responsibly. Okay. Like jaise hi the curfews and all, or the lockdowns, or as soon as the restrictions go away, people are actually, you cannot step out in the market because they are full. So that's about it. Social distancing is possible. I mean, we can still meet people if we can do it responsibly. The problem is that out of these million people, how many would meet responsibly? Not even 1%. And it's nothing to do with the kind of education they have and all. It's just human nature. So that's why I think social distancing can be done and should be done. There is no way that we don't do that.
Right, right. And now my third statement is, there was a report from this AstraZeneca pharmaceuticals about their Covishield vaccine. And it was there that probably as the time will pass, the antibody level against the vaccine will dwindle down. And somebody was advising that there may be of booster dose. What are your comments on that?
So sorry, I did not get the last part of the statement. The network.
Actually, in fact, presently, this Covishield vaccine, we are giving two shots,
right,
at an interval of 6 weeks to 8 weeks. Previously, it was 4 weeks. Subsequently, it was increased to 6 to 8 weeks. Now, there was a report from the AstraZeneca that they may introduce a booster shot after 6 months.
Right.
So, what are your comments?
So that's what happens in vaccines, right? The booster shots are meant for this purpose only, because the vaccine, the antibodies decay after a certain amount of time. So that is very important, and that with more and more data availability, that those protocols will be set. So like, for example, if you say hepatitis vaccines, right? Now after so many years, I mean, the schedule is set. We know that this is the optimum level of immunity can be obtained by this kind of schedule. So this will happen with this also. It will evolve, and we will eventually know what kind of optimum protocol should be followed for vaccination. But booster doses are definitely very important to keep the antibodies at their peak. Right. Secondly, like, for example, if you see influenza vaccines or swine flu vaccines, it's recommended that we take the new strain vaccine every year. So every vaccine has a different kind of biology and cycle. So I mean, and it happens only after we have enough data. So I think it will be a very good move if a third booster is also introduced, because I mean, side effects we have found are rare. There have been a couple of very serious side effects, but we've also had many people who didn't even get a fever. So it's a safe vaccine, we know. So if they feel that, if the studies say that a third booster will optimize the antibody levels, then it will be a very good move, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Rajiv Jain, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Shelly, true to your style, you presented the matter very clearly, very concisely, and very graphically to the point. No doubt you have a gift of the gap, really. The question that comes to my mind are actually two issues. One is, the laboratories which are conducting neutralizing antibody measurements or even IgG measurements. In the reports itself, there is no communication tool to make people understand that the social distancing mask and the protection tools have to continue to be used, as is happening. Many people, I've seen more than 80% people do not, after vaccination, do not understand or do not realize that they have to continue using COVID appropriate behavior. So that means that there is a lack of communication which is essential prior to vaccination as well as after vaccination. Same thing is in testing. Even with RT-PCR test, even with antibody test and neutralizing antibodies, the tool of communication, there is some deficiency. I asked people who are showing the report that what does it mean? They do not really understand what is the meaning of the test result. So which means there is a lot to be done by government labs as well as private labs. So I feel that what's your take on that? That's part one. Part two is vaccinology has remained an enigma with most of the people. we pediatricians have the vaccinology is our bread and butter. Without vaccines, we can't be actually called pediatricians, because we have been thriving only on vaccines to drive our profession. Do you feel that vaccines for adults will gain momentum in the years to come? With initial, now people are now realizing the importance of vaccine for adults. This I'm saying because a whole lot of adult vaccines are available, but nobody has invested in scaling up, so that volume, the value per dose comes down, or nobody has thought of investing for adults. Leave aside people who are old, who are more vulnerable. Say, for example, renal failure patients or people with cancer, with immunocompromised status. Still, I find many practitioners do not prescribe, say, pneumococcal vaccine, not even influenza vaccine to these individuals, even in established tertiary care centers. So these are the two issues which have come to my mind at that point.
Right. Actually, I actually agree with both of this with you. Your first part was about the communication and awareness amongst people about still following all the safety norms. And I would not say that there was, the government also has always been communicating that even after vaccination, wear mask, even after vaccination, follow social distancing. So of course, there is definitely some lack in it because people did not do that, and that's why now the next wave is here. For us, I can speak that whenever possible, we speak to our patients. Whenever our patients call us to understand what the report means, we do tell them that this is not for diagnostic purposes. This does not tell you what will happen tomorrow. This only tells you what has happened, what is there in your today's sample. And that's what I tell all my in fact RT-PCR testing patients also, that this only means that you do not have the infection in your sample today. So it does not mean ki it's not that nahi hoga infection. So yes, definitely lack of awareness, but also a little bit of lack of responsibility amongst people. It's been going on for now 1.5 years, and since 1.5 years, all we hear is wear masks, maintain social distancing, wear masks, maintain social distancing. But still there is some feels like it's not so. I would not believe that in these 1.5 years, there is even a single person in this country, kitna bhi literate or kitna bhi illiterate, has not heard this or has not, understood the importance of it. But still there is a certain section of people who do not want to take up the responsibility and who still feel that, kuch nahi ho raha, mujhe kuch nahi, that attitude, hame kuch nahi hoga types. So that is one thing. Second part about the awareness of adult vaccinations in adults. I agree with that also. I'll give you an incident. When I was in the US, me as a doctor, I started taking the flu vaccines when I was there every year. So I had heard about it in always that, we should take flu vaccine every year, but I did not do it. Because it's not like a norm here, right? So that I totally agree with you. But when I was in the US, I realized that everyone takes the flu vaccine. In fact, in our hospital, we were to submit a certificate, that everyone takes the flu vaccine when that season comes. So yes, I agree with that also. Not just flu vaccine, HPV vaccine, or if it's not in your pediatric vaccination schedule, people just forget about it after 5 years of age. People forget about it. So HPV vaccine, then even hepatitis vaccines. We as healthcare workers need to have the vaccination, hepatitis vaccination, when we join, especially lab work. So we know about it and we do it. But I would not be surprised if no healthcare worker gets the vaccine. So I agree that lack of awareness is definitely there, even amongst healthcare workers, let alone a layperson. So yes, I mean, that should be something which should be taken up.
Thank you.
Dr. Vivek Chandra Rao, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Sandeep. Thank you very much, Dr. Mahajan. It was a very educated talk. We all had clarity on the subject. My question is that those who take flu shots every year, do they need to take this year also flu shot? If yes, after how much time of the second dose of COVID vaccine?
So there is no study denying or, approving this. As I said, COVID vaccine is specific to COVID antigen. That should not be cross-reacting, in my opinion, should not be cross-reacting with a flu vaccine. Flu vaccine has to be taken every year because every year the vaccine comes up with a new strain of antigens. So I honestly do not have an informed opinion on this. But as far as my understanding goes, because COVID vaccine is a very specific S protein vaccine, but that said, there has not been enough data of what would, or how it they will interact or react with each other. So I mean, that this would be a very kind of uninformed and only objective opinion, my subjective opinion on this.
If yes, how much time gap we should leave?
I think any two vaccines, the time period should not be affecting much, but about 3 to 6 months maybe. Okay. But as I said, there is no data to prove or disprove it. So let's just wait for something to come up on this as well, and then take a call on that.
Yeah. Sorry, I joined this meeting.
No, I would like to correct Dr. Shelley. Dr. Shelley, the WHO has in fact announced for the north of the world and south of the world the current year's vaccine for influenza. And also then there's the guidelines. If you read WHO website, they have also stipulated that there should be a gap of minimum 14 days between this COVID-19 vaccine and influenza vaccine.
Okay.
And vaccine in the world which are single dose vaccine. Some are 2-dose vaccine. If you have taken the last 14 days and
there's some audio disturbance. So
yeah, I have another question.
Dr. Shelley, as Dr. Rajeev Jain is what he's saying, that as per WHO, there should be a 14 days gap between the COVID vaccination and the flu vaccination.
Okay.
I hope, sir, this clarifies this point. And there are two questions from our Q&A box. I think both of them, they have been answered by you. Why RT-PCR becomes positive after corona vaccination? Because it can be because of the mild infection, which can be there, and reinfection can be there. So we need to be very cautious about wearing mask and maintaining physical distancing. And second question is from Dr. Ghanshyam Dulera. How much should be the antibody titer to get protection? So that is also an evolving study, and now still we are not clear how much titer is required for a long-term protection. So any other question, if any panelists have, they can unmute themselves, they can ask. Else we would like to thank Dr. Shelley for this very lovely session. And
Dr. Sharma, can I ask one question?
Yeah, sure, sir. Yes.
Yeah, good evening. Excellent presentation. One important question: the antibody titer may be dwindling, but there are memory cells which, while re-challenge the antigen, they are searching for the antigen. And if it's re-exposed, will this work in the future exposure? The role of memory cells.
Yeah, so that is again something which we don't know yet. Doesn't see, the memory cells are basically, once you get the infection, then the memory cells get primed, and again when it meets that same antigen, they start producing the antibodies. So scientifically speaking, theoretically speaking, it should work, but How it will work, to what extent it will work, again, we don't know yet. So I think we'll have to wait to understand that.
I have got a question. Can I?
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, Dr. Lele.
See, the question is like this: in Maharashtra, government is asking people who are working to conduct RT-PCR every 15 days. I mean, you have partly answered that question, but is it not foolish to ask such a thing to do? And earlier they were asking for antigen, rapid antigen test weekly. Is it right?
So I partly heard the question. I think that what you're asking is that now they are asking for RT-PCR, but earlier they were asking for rapid antigen.
No, not only that. There is a period, you know, rapid antigen weekly and RT-PCR bi-weekly.
Bi-weekly, like twice in a week.
Once in 15 days.
Once in 15 days.
Okay, once in 15 days.
No, is it right? I mean,
yeah,
what
it is definitely. See, definitely it's right. So what happens is that it also changes with the prevalence. Now, there was a time when RT-PCR report of 10 days back was also not accepted at certain places. So 2 weeks is certainly fine, because what we can assume is that there is an incubation period of the virus. And if today I am negative for RT-PCR, then probably even if I was infected yesterday, it will take me 5-6 days to start developing the, have that much viral load to start transmitting the infection. So a period of 2 weeks seems to be a fair period, because during that time, even if I'm infected during those 2 weeks, I would not, by the end of 2 weeks, I probably will not be as infective. Also, one also needs to, sort of optimize these decisions based on the infrastructure available. Now, if all the, if everyone starts getting tested every week, then probably, those who are in actual need may not get the report. And when we have the turnaround time of 24 hours, like within 24 hours, we need to give the report. So if you see ideal situation, an RT-PCR test every 5 days will definitely prevent the, the spread, but that is not very optimum in terms of the risk-benefit ratio. So, I think it's totally fine if it's a 2-week gap also. Rapid antigen was, why rapid antigen was for a shorter duration is because it is less sensitive, right? As it is, there is a lot of false negatives in rapid antigen test. If it's a very small amount of virus load, then rapid antigen will be negative. So it's quite possible that today rat is negative, but 2 days later I become infective, because within 2 days the viral load becomes that much. While in RT-PCR, it's a highly sensitive test. Even if it's a small load of virus, it will detect it even if the person is not infective at that stage. Yeah. So that is a difference. That's why between rat and RT-PCR, the duration can change.
Dr. Shelly, to add to this, let me add, if we see the pathogenesis of this virus, normally this virus dies off after 10 days. And that is the reason why government has given this ruling that after 10 days, person who are under home isolation, they stand discharged. And even RT-PCR, it can come positive through the dead virus. So a person in whom he is clear of the virus after 10 days, and there is no test required after home isolation after 10 days, but he can get reinfected. And once he can get reinfected after 10 days, and again one RT-PCR will can tell this, yes, again he is positive, but that positivity can be due to dead virus, it can be due to the again reinfection. So how you will be sure that it is because of reinfection or it is because of dead virus? So what Dr. Lele wants to say, after every 15 days, if you are doing RT-PCR for the same person, is it due to live virus or it is because of dead virus? How you will ascertain?
Madam, can I intervene? Just corroborating the Dr. Sharma.
Yeah.
See, we do RT-PCR test today. So it gives a result as on today. Tomorrow that person can get infected, remains asymptomatic and still pass on the infection. But he will say my report is negative. So everybody will think he's not infected. That is the problem with this RT-PCR test.
Yes.
A negative report does not rule out reinfection and the infectivity of the individual. So to me, this rule really looks very problematic. I think the ideal treat is you treat everybody as potentially infections and take social distancing measures.
Yes, that is the main
issue
for this year.
And that other question which I asked about this vaccination, I mean, I have come across 2 people who were vaccinated and their RT-PCR, they were going abroad or they were going somewhere in country. It became positive when they had taken all the precautions and they had no problem. I mean, that was something which was surprising because they had planned everything and suddenly they had to cancel everything and they had to be isolated when they were asymptomatic and there were no problem. That was the reason I asked this question. Can vaccination produce this positive RT-PCR?
No, we don't have any such report yet because see, in RT-PCR, we are testing the viral RNA. We are not testing anything else. And in vaccination, we are not injecting the viral RNA. We are injecting only a part of the virus. Again, the antigen of the virus. So it's RT-PCR. If RT-PCR is positive, then there is some kind of exposure to the person, and there is viral RNA in the throat. That's what we know. It can be a dead virus. It can be a live virus. Yes, we can't differentiate between that. But as I said, even vaccinated individuals can get infected. Only thing is that they will not have a very mild disease. So that's the only thing here.
Okay. So I think this was a very lively discussion, Dr. Shelly.
Thank you so much.
Yes, as Dr. Gajendra Kumar told, it is a very apt topic today, as on today, because we were also not knowing much about neutralizing antibodies. We had heard about Trump being treated by injecting monoclonal antibodies, and his recovery was quite swift. And same thing can be tested and done over in India. So now we are more wise about this neutralizing antibodies. So if we are testing antibodies after infection, we should better go for IgG, IgM. IgM for recent infection, IgG for his infection which had happened in past. And if we are testing antibody levels for after vaccination, we should go for neutralizing antibodies, and they are more specific of protecting against the reinfection. So I think this gives a broad idea of how we should proceed further to mitigate this COVID-19 pandemic. So thank you very much, Dr. Shelly. It was a nice session.
Thank you.
And any new development, you please convey to us. We'll again organize one session because this is a evolving pandemic and new things will be coming up in the studies, and we would like to know much about all these things so that we can make our management aware, make ourselves aware, and make our community also aware, our workforce aware, and we can protect them. So thank you very much. And
thank you so much, sir.
To all the panelists and participants, we will again meet on coming Saturday at 6:30 p.m. And the topic will be benefits and importance of preventive health checkup, which is quite relevant during these times. And faculty will be Dr. Rakesh Gupta. He is Professor in Internal Medicine from Apollo Hospitals. Thank you, Dr. Shelly.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you very much. And thanks to all the panelists and participants.
Thank you.